Thank you, Kate. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm going to stay over here with my notes. I apologise for the quality of my voice. So good morning. Now, when you open your computer, when you swipe your phone, when you turn on the telly to see what's happening in the world, do you know if it's fact or fake? Do you know if it's real or not? Do you care, and does it really matter? Well, all my career reporting from around the globe on wars, humanitarian disasters, the rise of Islamist extremism, I've been able to take pride in distinguishing what is real and what is false and tell my audience, and have them believe me because they trust the BBC. Sometimes things sound like they couldn't possibly be real, sounds more like science fiction. Like a 150-meter-long gun that could fire rockets armed with chemical weapons into space and back to Earth, threatening British troops. But we found it hidden in an Iraqi mountain by Saddam Hussein's scientists. The supergun, as it was called, was a fact of the First Gulf War in 1991. And sometimes things appeared as if they were genuine. A Russian who got me to film the smuggling of radioactive uranium across Europe to Britain during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Again, in the 90s, when there were genuine fears of Soviet nukes leaking. That was a fake. And thank goodness we discovered that by questioning, by interrogating every aspect of that story when it just didn't add up. The BBC never broadcast the footage, and it's still gathering dust in a box somewhere in Television Centre. Now, we've always had fake news. It was just called propaganda. Right from the 1st century BC, when Octavian ran a campaign of disinformation against Mark Antony. He portrayed him as a drunkard, a womanizer, and a puppet of Cleopatra's. Antony killed himself after hearing false rumors that the Egyptian queen had committed suicide. In medieval Britain, in Lincoln, during the anti-Semitic pogroms of the Middle Ages, the supposed torture and crucifixion of a 9-year-old boy was falsely attributed to the Jewish community. It was what was called a blood libel, and it led to the execution of 18 Jews. Even Joseph Pulitzer, the man who, after all, gave his name to the most prestigious journalist prize to this day, was responsible for creating yellow journalism in the 1880s. Sensational murder stories, lurid headlines, to win a circulation war between his New York papers and that of Randolph Hearst's. So yellow journalism, and it was called that because they used yellow ink, came to mean reporting that presented little or no legitimate, well-researched news, relying instead on headlines for increased sales. In Britain, we called it tabloid journalism, tabloid news, and it certainly began stretching the boundaries between fact and fiction in the 70s and 80s when I began my career. But what's happened in the past decade as the media world has been changed so radically by the digital revolution is of a completely different order of fakeness, and it's dangerous. 40 years ago, believe it or not, when I started, it took days to bring film footage back to the studio to process it and to get it on the television. Now, in a few seconds, literally, wherever I am, whatever I am actually seeing before me and recording and trying to make sense of, someone has probably filmed it on their mobile and uploaded it. It's in the ether already. It's being curated, as they call it, by people thousands of miles away. They haven't even been to the place where I'm standing or met the person I'm speaking to or seeing the war unfolding before them. They're turning around those pictures, they're tagging them, they're explaining them, they're putting their spin on them, and they're regurgitating them to millions of people on Facebook and Twitter, even before I've finished my interview and headed back, thanks to social media and the internet. And that is changing our grip on reality, even the very definition of reality itself. Because reality is something that we've all come to a consensus about over the decades, over the centuries. Our institutions, governments, academics, the media, a reality based on faith in reason and empiricism. It's the old-fashioned way, perhaps, today. Something is real because it's happening, and it is witnessed, and it is interpreted by someone that you trust, the BBC, say, or The Guardian, or ABC. And it's probably bolstered visually with photographs or with video that you can also trust. Social media, however, has brought in a new era. You, the individual, can encounter news in a way that confirms your own biases, perhaps your own prejudices, and it can screen out facts that contravene your view. Conspiracy theories, always an absolute menace to those of us seeking the truth, have been given a huge boost by social media, to the point where those theories are willed into being true, because they're actually more exciting than reality sometimes. So what is fake news? Well, it's material published with the intent to mislead in order to damage a person, an organization, a government, and to gain financially or politically. It uses sensationalist, dishonest, or fabricated headlines to increase readership and internet click revenue. So it actually makes money from advertising, regardless of the truth of the story. Don't confuse it with spoof or satire. It's purporting to be fact, to be news, to be reality. Now, some people believe that one man, amongst all the exponents of fake news, one man has done more than anyone to bring on this world beyond truth, to sanction fake news, and to undermine reality. Donald Trump. He made 2016, 2017 the year of fake news. It became hard to tell what was fact and what was false right from the start of the presidential race. A BuzzFeed analysis found that the top 20 fake news stories about the 2016 US presidential election received more engagement on Facebook than the top 20 news stories from 19 major media outlets. The president himself has rather confused the issue by referring disparagingly in his endless tweets and retweets to fake news. He uses it about traditional media, especially CNN. He's also used it about the BBC. CBS 60 Minutes has said that, CBS, you all know, one of the American broadcasting heavyweights, 60 Minutes, the current affair show that's been on air longest. They said that Trump uses the term to describe any news, however legitimate and responsible, which he disagrees with. Last year, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, claimed that fake news was one of the 3 most disturbing internet trends, along with the surge in the use of the internet by governments for surveying their own citizens and cyber warfare. Until these were resolved, he said, the internet could never do what he intended it to, which is to serve humanity. Fake news undermines serious media coverage and makes it more difficult for journalists to cover significant news stories and to be believed. It can stir up hatred, racial and religious. False rumors broadcast via Facebook recently reportedly set Buddhist against Muslim recently in Sri Lanka. It has led to lynchings in Indonesia, and the grisly videos that they took and posted went viral, like me. And as we all know, what goes on the internet pretty much stays there forever. In the past few weeks, in my own experience and the stories that I cover, I've seen fake news muddy the waters and have a truly sinister effect in 2 major events, both very shocking scenarios, to the point where many people have believed the fake rather than the fact. Did the Russians use a nerve agent in Salisbury to poison a former Russian spy and his daughter, Sergei and Yulia Skripal? The British government says they are certain. They have the motives, the Russians, they have the means, and they've done it before, when the Russian state poisoned the dissident Alexander Litvinenko with polonium in London in 2006. But the Russians say no, that's fake news. It was the UK, it was the British government who were behind the poisoning. So according to our own UK government, which has done some work on this pretty smartly because they have to hit back, the government's unleashed a wave of disinformation, of fake news in the wake of that Salisbury attack. There was a 4,000% increase in the spread of propaganda from Russian-based accounts, many of which were identified as automated bots. We also had the strange supposed recording of Yulia speaking to her aunt from hospital on the telephone, assuring her everything was fine. It really wasn't as it was being presented by the British. And this was broadcast by Russian television. It caused the Metropolitan Police to have to put out a statement, a counter-statement from Yulia herself, giving her own version. But of course, so pervasive has been the influence of fake news that probably many people thought this was made up too. So fake news doesn't just undermine the serious media, it undermines democratic governments too, to the point that their citizens may no longer believe the statements which they put out. That was just an audio recording. What happens when the most powerful medium, the moving image, video, is no longer trusted, no longer believed automatically to prove the reality of a situation? Just 2 weeks ago, we all saw those terrible scenes from Douma near Damascus. It appears that chemical weapons were used on civilians in Syria, chlorine and perhaps sarin, a nerve agent. More than 40 people, many of them children, died an absolutely agonizing death. And we saw the pictures. They were literally foaming at the mouth, unable to breathe. They were asphyxiated. There have been about a dozen such incidents verified over the past few years by the UN and their international inspectors. And the UN's been absolutely clear that only the Assad regime has the ability to develop such weapons, in particular those sophisticated nerve agents. And they're the only ones who have the air power. They have the jets, they have the helicopters to deliver them into those civilian areas. Now, the Syrians claimed that they had got rid of their stockpile of chemical weapons back in 2013, and in fact, under the scrutiny of their ally, Russia, and President Putin. But that was in the time of President Obama, before the Trump election. But since then, in 2017, and the great flowering of fake news, and again in Douma 2 weeks ago, the Assad regime and the Russians trotted out that convenient phrase, fake news, to claim that these chemical attacks that we were seeing on video were falsified. They said that it just didn't happen. And actually, sometimes they said the rebels didn't do it. They had lots of different accounts. So now we have their version, or their versions. And that message has been magnified. One bot, in this instance, sent 100 posts over 12 days to reach 23 million people before the account was suspended. Another bot reached 61 million users by effectively using and spreading around 2,000 posts. The British Prime Minister has said that the Russians are using cyber as a wider effort to undermine the whole international system. So you've got fake news and you've got cyber skills, a truly powerful combination. And the Syrians are even using some journalists and doctors to cast doubt on the videos of these alleged chemical attacks taken by the white helmets. You all know who they are. They're the opposition civil defense who go into these situations to rescue civilians. But the regime says that these videos, they don't really show the victims of chemical poisoning. They're just fakes. Now, the white helmets haven't helped their case. They've played into the hands of the regime a year ago because they actually staged a fake rescue after a bomb attack. They later admitted that they had staged it. It was all part of a Twitter campaign that they hoped would publicize their humanitarian work. What were they thinking of? It backfired spectacularly. They have apologized, but obviously they've lived to regret that ill-judged attempt to cash in on their celebrity. It has given their enemies the ammunition that they need now to cast doubt on the White Helmet's videos, and including the latest attack in Duma. And it's led many to doubt the veracity of the videos that they post. And it shows how faking it, even in that horrendous reality of Syria, which we cannot deny, is somehow considered acceptable. President Trump's frequent claims that the mainstream American media regularly reports fake news has increased distrust of the American media globally, particularly in Russia. And his claims have given credibility to these stories. And now some authoritarian and repressive governments are using fake news to their own advantage, not by creating it themselves as a kind of propaganda, but by arguing that journalists who are trying to report the truth are promulgating fake news. And they have proposed laws in India and Malaysia to punish those telling the public what is really going on in those societies when it's just not a message that those governments want to hear. And there are new digital developments that make fake news seem tame. AI, artificial intelligence, it is now making it possible to transpose, to fix literally someone's face onto an existing pornographic picture. It is the ultimate identity theft. It is cruel and invasive, and it calls itself deep fakes. And commercial and academic labs are developing even more sophisticated tools, algorithms that map facial recognition techniques and mimic voices. There's a video, I don't know if you've seen it doing the rounds, of supposedly a former President Obama delivering a speech that he actually never made, and it's completely realistic. The possibilities, you can see, are endless. People could use it to blackmail, to compromise even their friends. So fake videos will create new and understandable suspicions about everything that we watch. They'll be used by politicians, they'll be used by propagandists, they'll be used by criminals to say, you think you caught me on camera, it's a fake. It's a malicious interpretation, I didn't actually do it. So how do we cling on to reality? How do we cling on to certainty? What do we do in the face of all of this? Well, we don't all have the time, the capacity, or the desire to sort out the fact from the fake. Our best hope lies in turning to authoritative sources, to newspapers, to TV we trust, to universities, to academics, people with long-held authority and a proven track record. We all, and I think, have to be on our guard, and we have to also pressure the technology companies. Will they understand this crisis? Do they understand it? Will they accept their responsibilities? Because they could take down fake videos. They could take down manipulated work at source. Just as they could have taken down violent videos, they could have taken down child pornography, ISIS execution videos, but they dragged their feet. They are still dragging their feet. Their record would show that so far they haven't shown a true commitment. We all of us here, all of us out there, we have to be on our guard to reject the false. Don't hype it, don't spread it, don't retweet it. Question it. Even though the imposter's version could actually be more exciting, more controversial, more sexy on your phone screen. It's especially down to you, because you're the generation who has never known a time without social media. So fact or fake, it's up to you and your hold on reality. Thank you.